Hey guys, you're listening to the Colecast. We are here today with Benton Frisse of River City Forge and Tool.
Nailed it.
I did it. Okay, we're going to talk about you, your biography, who you are, why you're here, and we'll talk a little bit about your class that's coming up here in a few months. So if you want to start, Benton.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I feel like that's always a loaded question, you know, when someone asks you, so it's like, where do I start? So I'm from Evansville, Indiana. It's my my hometown. I also grew up in a small town northwest of there called New Harmony. It's this beautiful, quaint, artistic town that really facilitates creativity.
Awesome.
So, and I have very creative parents and stuff too. So, right now, as we air this, as we record this, I'm 32. And I feel that every day all of a sudden. I've been blacksmithing for about, I guess it would be 11 years now. But I started blacksmithing when I was probably about 11. My stepdad, Wayne, he's been a blacksmith, a farrier, a welder, fabricator for 40 years, something like that. So I always use the phrase, I grew up in a metal shop, walking around hitting things with a ball peen.
Yeah.
Blacksmith for the first time when I was 11 at this really cool festival in New Harmony called Kunstfest, right? It's a very German town, so it's like the people's festival, right?
Yeah.
And so Wayne set up, he had a booth, he was selling some things there that he had forged, and he had a forge. Mm-hmm. And so I had a horseshoe, and I think I made an S-hook. I think I made a couple S-hooks that weekend. But I also had a horseshoe that I just beat on all weekend. And so that was like really the first time that I actually did any kind of blacksmithing with hot steel. And so, but then I didn't really touch it much. You know, I got into things that kids get into, golf, all those things. And in college, I realized.
Golf?
Yes.
That's something that kids get into?
That's what I got into. I loved golf, and I played drums for, I was an avid drummer.
Yeah.
You know, still got my Yamaha Rydeen 5-piece with A customs all the way around. And
break them out when you're trying to
a couple years ago.
Impress your friends?
I got him out a couple years ago, and it was the most frustrating thing. I hadn't played in like 15 years, and I remember how I used to be able to play.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it was like I had never played in my life, and I couldn't do the things that I remember I could do. Sure. So I took them down, and the room where they were is now my shipping and receiving room. So. Yeah. But anyway, so in college, one of my buddies was like, hey, his family are avid horse folk as well. And he was like, I got some horseshoes. Let's make some horseshoe knives. Do you think Wayne would let us get the forge out? I'm like, yeah, that sounds fun. And I also realized it was something that I could, drink beer and hang out with my friends on the weekend doing. And so one weekend we drug out Wayne's horseshoeing forge and 3 or 4 anvils, and we forged horseshoe knives. Now, things that resemble
a knife and a horseshoe?
Yeah, maybe at best. And then from there, it just skyrocketed. And so, I've been doing it ever since, and it's an addiction.
Yeah. So are you full-time?
I am not full-time. So I do have a full-time job. My full-time job, I'm a supply chain operations manager for a direct-to-consumer operation for a large consumer goods conglomerate. So it's a mouthful. It's a fancy way of saying I sit on conference calls and run Excel spreadsheets all day and look for ways to automate things. So and I've been doing that for that company for including my temp time. I've worked for that company since 2013. So
a long time.
Yeah, that's my day job. And then we really focused on this, on the weekends and in the evening.
Yeah. Very cool. So what kind of things are you focusing on? Tell us about what you make.
Well,
and why.
I love axes. I just absolutely love axes. It's, for me, I always tell people, right? I started out making knives. Mm-hmm. That's what I started out. My cousin, Jim Pogue, was a very well-renowned knife maker in the 90s. I make all of my equipment, or all of my axes and knives. Everything is made on his equipment. Mm-hmm. I purchased before he passed away. And I started out with knives, but I found them immensely frustrating, right? I'm not a detail-oriented person, right? I'm a big idea type of person that I'm not a detail. If you looked at my house, you'd be like, he's definitely not a detail oriented person.
Yeah.
So, and then Wayne and I had the idea, I saw on YouTube or something, of making a wrapped eye tomahawk. And so we decided to give it a stab one weekend. And I still remember setting my first forge weld, wrapping a tomahawk, and it sounded like a 30-06 going off in the shop and scared the daylights out of me. And then I took a class from an incredible tomahawk maker named Brian Johnson. Learned how to make tomahawks. So then I really shifted into the tomahawk world. And I was like, and at that point I started, I've always loved tools, right? I've always had, ever since I was little, a fascination with tools. We would go to salvage yards, and they would lose me in the tool aisle while they went and did everything. So I was looking at tools. Yeah. And when I was little, we had these, at one of our houses, we had like a campsite right out back, and they had these giant sandstones around them. And I would take pieces of that sandstone and I would grind that sandstone on the bigger sandstone and make hammers and little axes. And then I would duct tape them to sticks and swing them once and they'd break, but I loved it.
Yeah.
So then I really, I think that really influenced my fascination of hand tools. And then I learned about this cool place called Evansville Tool Works. And being from Evansville, I was like, no, this is cool. And so I got involved in, like, for fun, restoring vintage axes. And so that led into making axes, taking some classes from Elmer Rausch, who's an incredible axe maker. And then I took Liam Hoffman's first class in St. Louis. That was a blast. And so ever since then, I've gotten just completely hooked on axes. So right now, a very short answer to what I just gave you, we make primarily axes, and we make garden tools as well. That's mostly what we focus on, and we ship them all over the world.
Yeah. So you have been making them and focusing on them for how many years, would you say, at this point?
I would say it's been a primary focus since probably about 2014, 2015. Okay. Yeah, I think I stuck heavy to knives for maybe 3 or 4 years. And then I was like, this is not my game, because I can make 100 axes, and the first axe and the 100th axe are still just as fun, right? I don't want to throw that axe through anything, right? But let's say I take an order for 2 knives, and by the time I'm halfway through the first knife, I'm like, I never want to do this again. I never want to I'm going to sell anything that is just exclusive to knife making in our shop.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. So when we've been sitting here, just lavishing one another in interesting facts about tools. What about Evansville Tool Works kind of sparked your, was it Evansville Tool Works? Was that the?
Yeah. So they were, Evansville Tool Works. I have this thing, on both sides of my family that, there's a long line of craftsmanship on both sides of my family. Right. And so for me, being proud of where I'm from is very important to me.
Sure.
And Evansville was, like many places in Indiana around the turn of the 19th or 18th, 19th or 19th, 20th century, very industrious. Evansville was the furniture capital of the world. My great great grandfather was a furniture maker. My dad and my grandpa and my brother handmade dentures until a couple of years ago. The family business ran for 70 years. Wayne, he's been always making things my whole life. So this pride of coming from this Midwestern working with your hands really was already there. And then I learned about vintage axe restoration and things like that in Evansville Tool Works. And I was like, this is cool. And then I bought a house, and it's like a mile from the factory.
Really?
And where it was. And so like it was cool that like I could buy this thing from Evansville that was made that I don't have any idea what the journey of this tool has been.
Yeah.
And then you learn that a company like Evansville Tool Works made like 400,000 tools for the Army in World War II, which is insane. Like almost like half of the Jeeps in World War II had Evansville axes on them, which is blows my mind. So that was really a sense of pride for me. And it was cool that I could, I don't know, put something on a handle that's stamped Evansville and swing it into a tree,
Yeah. Kind of harkens back to that age. And I think, we were talking about Kelly and being up in Alexandria. And yeah, there's a huge number of companies that were in and around us, Anderson and Muncie area. We just lost the, Nicholson File Factory. They just tore that down. There was a lot of heritage tied up in that. And I think, I know several people now that I've met that are kind of doing what you're doing. It's there's this intense inner urge to pick up the mantle, so to speak, of like, on one hand, not only have we moved on as a society and some aspects of what we're interested in might be considered like outdated.
Right.
But the reality is, just because the practicality of it has shifted, we don't have the number of farmers that we did demanding the volume of tools, but there's something incredibly innately important to making.
Absolutely.
And simultaneously, societally, in general, we've experienced in lots of different ways, seasons where we feel devoid of purpose, devoid of meaning.
Yeah.
And I think getting engaged with our community is an aspect of that, and getting engaged with our hands is an aspect of that. And I think what I'm really interested in doing here at Cole, and we opened the school and all that kind of different stuff. It's like, I want to engage our community in working together. Whether community is the guy next door, or a guy flying in from California,
right.
We have a multitude of stacked communities in that way, and that's cool. But I really do think that there's this growing hunger in a lot of the, I'm part of the homesteading community and part of, organic farming and all that kind of stuff. And people are like, I'm seeing this massive burst of people looking for local food, looking for local producers, and saying, let's say you make 1,000 axes a year. You're not making 400,000 like Evansville was. You're also not supplying a nation.
Right.
And I think, it's almost indirect. What's the word I want to use? It's the opposite of how our society views small business. It's like, grow, get on e-commerce. I mean, we were part of that, right? Like, we grew from a little shop up to this company that we're at today. But I'm seeing the beginnings of people saying, yeah, that didn't work so well.
Yeah.
Becoming another multinational corporation isn't really what I'm shooting for. Yeah, you're going to have people that put Elon Musk up on a pedestal and say, I want to be like him when I grow up. But simultaneously, I think looking around at our communities and saying, we can create, again, really high quality tools that give a really big sense of value and fulfillment personally, and share that with our local community in a way that's useful to them, and begin again sharing this sense of like, no, we're proud of where we're at, what we're doing here, and my first goal isn't going to be becoming Amazon.
Right.
It's like, and beginning to make decisions based around community driven and not so much on profitability. And I think, a lot of the stuff that we're doing here, it's like, no, I want to invest in community first, and the community will support us.
Right.
Not in a charitable way. I mean, like, support us in like participating in this work with us, because there's plenty of work to do. But, as I've kind of followed the track of learning about, the tractor histories, John Deere and International, and what they went through and how they grew from a guy inventing a tool to, today.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. In John Deere, especially. So it's like, but you can watch this trajectory of a blacksmith creating a good product, the growth of that, becoming a business, becoming a corporation, getting experiencing either failure or success, or success then failure, and getting bought up then into a multinational conglomerate corporation. And that's not to say that that's wrong. A lot of our society's built upon there being that backstop of available goods, but
it's just a different path.
It's a different path. And I think, we have now the luxury, because of a lot of that societal stability, if you will, and maybe that's predicated on the, military industrial complex. I don't know. But it's like, no, now we can say there's enough of that. And there's enough of the Ace Hardware level tools. People want stuff. I can't remember his name. I just saw him on Instagram. He started making these spades, these hand forged spades from like late mid 1800s. And he got like 200 orders for him, and he's like literally hand making every single one. And it's like, people are hungry for that level of interaction with the maker of their good. Because when you buy an iPhone, there's no connection. When you buy a tool at Ace Hardware, it's like, this was stamped out and it's only $19. It's like, I don't even care. I'd rather pay $200 and walk away feeling like, no, I bought this tool. It's locally made. It's, especially in the sense of local being like, I was just selling some of our milk to a local friend before we started this. It's like people are so hungry for that.
They are
interaction because we've now had a generation of being devoid of it and getting to the end of that and having all this money and saying, I don't really.
I think it contributes a lot too to like, your Ace Hardware style of tools or even other things, right? They're disposable goods.
Yeah. Agreed.
So not only is there's no connection with the maker, but it facilitates the lack of education of how that tool is supposed to be used. Right. So if you go to Ace Hardware and you buy a $10 hammer, like you're going to hit anything you can with that hammer. As opposed to what that hammer is supposed to be used for. And that's even the same thing with an axe. Like when people order an axe from me, they're like, can I use it for this? I'm like, you can use whatever you want, right? But I would personally not take a $200 axe and do that. And if you do that, I will absolutely not warranty that.
Right.
You know what I mean? It leads into that, and it's nobody's fault, but just where we've gone, right? People don't know that you shouldn't use the back of a hammer or even you shouldn't strike a hardened hammer with a rock or something like that. Right. It just you're right. There's this desire for connection, but there's also like, for me, I think, and a lot of my customers, it's this want to pass something down, right? Because we all have, like, I have, one of my favorite things to do is use some of Wayne's blacksmithing hammers that he bought when he was in horseshoeing school in the 70s, you know, or I have my great grandfather's Kelly Perfect double bit axe, you know.
That's a nice axe.
Yeah, it's got phantom bevels and it's on like a 35-inch handle. It's really cool. But being able to use something that the people that you love and care about have used before and sweated and bled on it and like all this stuff, like it's an incredible feeling.
Yeah, agreed. Well, and I think it harkens to the desire to, we have a lot more historical context for oral tradition of passing down family knowledge that, my grandparents poured into me deeply when I was a kid. My grandma taught me how to garden and grow food and can, and we made jams and jellies and noodles and all kinds of fun stuff. We would pickle. We did sauerkraut and pickles and all kinds of stuff, right? And then my grandpa had me out there. We were rebuilding. We rebuilt a Kennedy auto blower together, and he taught me how to take things apart because I just took stuff apart and then it was broke. And he's like, no, here's how you do it, and you keep track of your parts, and here's how you. He really poured into me, and I think that's not normal now.
No,
there's not enough value driven to that generational interconnectedness. It's like, no, we got to take care of our grandparents, and now it's like, we're going to probably just put them in a home. We're just going to
dump them, not our problem.
Abdicate this responsibility. And so we, my wife and I decided to bring our in-laws in with us. Well, my in-laws, her parents moved to the farm with us because I was like, I want to have this multi-generational constant access. And it's hard, man, but it's also like my kids are getting a way fuller picture of what life is intended to be.
Absolutely.
They're getting opinions and viewpoints, and they're getting all these different angles of like information and education. And, they're learning about their history. You know, I read somewhere it takes like 4,000, and it's maybe these numbers are totally, it's like 4,000 people have to decide to be together for you to be here today. Like it took a lineage of 4,000 different people coming together for you to be here today. And, you know, you've got now how many generations of knowledge and education and hard-won experience to end up to today where it's like, well, I'll just Google it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, no. You know,
just take the
your
shortcut.
answer might be not as good as the Google answer,
right.
But I still think that local, Evan's going to be mad at me. I'm just smacking the table.
We're both former drummers. So this is our,
legitimately.
This is our.
But I'd still take a deeper knowledge.
Yeah.
Now that I've experienced this, like this answers devoid of historical context and meaning. It's like, yeah, I can get the right answer now, but now we're all sharing the right answer. We're all experts. That hasn't panned out so hot.
No, it hasn't.
You know, and so now it's almost like, well, your facts don't line up with my facts. What do we do? It's like, I don't know.
I guess
you
we'll
know,
just hate each other.
Exactly. We have no reference for what to do in that moment.
Absolutely. All because people are hunting for instant gratification.
Well, and all for the sense of like my family's heritage and knowledge wasn't passed down to me.
Right.
So I had to go get it from someone else.
Yep.
And now we're just confused. So all of that is wrapped up in this heritage, this knowledge of like teaching and education around the tools you're making heritage quality tools.
Absolutely.
And then you're making the tools you're using. You're personally, we were just talking about, how do I do this better? I think we can modify this process to end up with a better result. It's like a real focus on creatively overcoming the challenges and obstacles along the way. It's like, I can attest to that not being the norm in boardrooms across America.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like a race to the cost bottom and shareholder value. And
absolutely.
It's just like, we're at Cole, we're blessed. We do have a board, and we have a board that's willing to invest in community and into pursuit of what are we capable of doing, and how do we leverage it well?
And what's the best way to do it?
Absolutely. And it's a constant conversation about that. So, anyway, just tangent,
it's going to happen a lot.
Yeah. So
just be ready.
I think, so that's kind of, anyway, full circle back to the question of, so that all brought you into making tools. You've got this wonderful local historical, just like
awesome
rabbit trail available to you at any point. It's like, how did they do this and why, and what kinds of tools did they make? You said, so you're building are you putting together like a catalog, you said, of the Evansville tools?
I have a friend who's putting together a catalog of their history, and so you can trace like stamps from certain time frames and what they, cool. And I've got some really cool stuff. I've got like a 1932 sales catalog from Evansville Toolworks, and that was about the time they rolled out their tested line. So it's TEST-D. And it was all based on the type of wedge. It was the top, the wedge looks, just like a regular wedge from like a step wedge. But when you pull it out and you look at it, it's in an S shape, and it was a patented S shape wedge that they thought locked the head in better. So
well, Kelly did I think it was, they trademarked, what do they call it? They forged grooves into the eye.
Yes.
But then they milled the handles to match it.
Yes. And if you have to rehang one of those, it's a nightmare.
Is it?
Man. Yeah. If you just get on Axe Junkies on Facebook, it's always like, there's somebody that's really interested and they've only hung a couple of axes and they have a hold of one of those axes and they're like, how do I get this handle on? Like, you are gearing up for a rodeo that you have no idea what's going to happen, But they did. It was a way to keep the handles on, pre like Permabond days.
Right.
And the catalog is fascinating because it's all the illustrations in this catalog they're hand drawn and they're hand colored.
Right.
So it's really cool, just to see this kind of a sales catalog. And so like that, being able to look at that and think like, man, I would like to have a cool catalog like this, to be able to show somebody, be like, well, let me show you the products that we actually make.
Right.
I don't know, man, just that heritage and that history is just so cool to me.
Yeah. It was palpable.
It is. Yeah. And then I see Evan's got my website pulled up right here. I love that word, heritage tools, right? Because every tool that I sell and every tool that I make, I want somebody to use it, and then I want their kids to use it,
right?
And then I want their grandkids to use it, and then someday down the line, they're going to be like, where did this come from? Right. This was like my grandpa's axe or whatever. And I need to do some imagery update on my website. That was back from 2020. I've made a lot more.
I see some knives.
There is a couple on there. I did the only knife I sold in 2020. I did a Damascus Hunter with, bog oak and nickel silver.
Yeah.
And it was so fun, but I was also like, never again. I mean, and as I say that, I forged out a couple of knives. It's just not my thing. It's something that I get.
It's a struggle. It's a difficult.
It is, man. Yeah. There's, I will quote one of my favorite teachers, Elmer Rausch. And for folks that don't know Elmer Rausch, I mean, the man is he has handled historical items of, basically his job for a long time was. He was over in Europe. I think he was in Czechoslovakia, but I could be wrong. And they would pull Viking era finds out of peat bogs, and his job was to recreate those. So
that's a job and a half.
Yeah.
Good night.
What a cool job.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he teaches a lot of classes and stuff like that, Viking era blacksmithing. And so he really taught me how to fold axes instead of, because you can punch, fold. There's all kinds of different methods. Yeah. But anyway, he...
Elmer Rausch?
Yeah, Elmer, and then Rausch, Roush. I think he has a website. I don't know if it's still
I feel like he's demoed at IBA before.
He has. He demoed at Ashokan like 2 or 3 years ago, too.
Ashokan?
Yeah.
What's Ashokan?
It's Is
that the Meteorite Masher group?
No, Ashokan is the big bladesmithing hammer-in up in like New York or something. They do like every 3 years is like a sword year. They focus on swords. And I think I'm going to paraphrase here, but it's, I think it has like ABS affiliation and that kind of stuff. So,
got it.
But anyway, people always ask me like, why don't you make more knives? And I'm like, Elmer has one of the favorite lines that I've ever heard. And I asked Elmer, we were in a class, because his axes are just excellent. His spears are welded. I mean, historical construction spears that are welded and wrapped and excellent tools. And I said, Elmer, how come you don't make knives? And he said, well, because there's a lot of really, really good knife makers out there, and there is absolutely no need for me to muddy those waters. So that's the way I think of that. I'll make some every now and then. He makes incredible tomahawks. He makes some really good. There's some of his Viking axes. I bought a rust pattern one based off of the rust find in Kiev, Russia, and he's got some boarding axes, and he was the resident blacksmith at John C. Campbell for many years.
Okay.
So, excellent human being.
Very cool. Very, very cool. And his context to you was he was one of the guys that you did classes trained with?
I took a week-long Viking era blacksmithing class, and I had met him a couple years ago and stuff, and so I learned how to. I had folded axes before using the alternating. So for those of the folks listening or whatever, one of the ways you can fold an axe is what they call using the alternating fuller technique, which is, you have it looks like a bow tie, and you set 2 fullers to form the boundaries of your eyes and your poles, and then you fuller those out and fold it, and you fold it in half, and you have the construction of your eye. And that's how a lot of historical axes were made, because they, giant blocks of steel were immensely expensive, or just not really available, or not a thing. Yeah. But anyway, so I took a class from him, and we did, arrowheads and spears, which forging a spear is so much fun. Very difficult. Lots of cross beam hammering. Yeah. Very, very thin steel. So, but anyway, he was just a person that I took a class from that immensely influenced me. So
very, very cool.
He and like Brian Johnson and, Matt Parkinson and those guys. So,
So what are you, we've covered a lot of ground about where you started, where you are today. What are your hopes for River City Forge and Tool? What are you wanting to do with that thing?
That's a really good question, and Wayne and I talk about that all the time. So if you had asked me in 2021, I'd be like, well, probably at the end of this year, we're going to have to hire someone. And because in 2021, we did just myself working a full-time job, and Wayne being retired and, working in the mornings and stuff like that, which he has other things that he does, handrails and stuff. And my mom has a honey-do list for him. He's retired. So, we did well over 100 axes, and we did well over 100 garden tools, and we did a bunch of miscellaneous stuff in between.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was really starting to dabble in the world of wholesale orders. I had some deals with like Bespoke Post, which is a really cool place. Yeah. I was selling some through Smoky Mountain Knife Works, and I was like, okay, I'm at my plateau. We are at our plateau where we can't produce more and maintain quality. So I'll either have to dial it back. That's a Bespoke Post order right there. That was, I think, the first wholesale order I did, and they ordered like 25, I think 20
you
or
look
25.
Tired.
Oh man, I was so tired. Because that was also a super chaotic time in my day job, and so I was working a ton.
Yeah,
and
it always happens at the same time.
It does. Yeah, it absolutely does. And we were like, okay, we either need to hire somebody. I was like, maybe I need to hire an apprentice that comes out, because Wayne and I are on separate schedules, right?
Yeah.
Wayne's retired. Wayne works best in the morning. I hit my stride and I work best from like 5 to like 11 p.m., and I'm also a night owl, so that doesn't really help. So at that point, if you would have asked me, I would have said, I'm probably going to have to hire someone and in the next 5 years go full time. But a lot of that has really changed in the sense of my day job has gotten busy. I've moved positions and moved up the ladder a little bit in my day job. And is that as fun as blacksmithing? No, not even close.
Yeah.
But it pays the bills,
Right.
So I think going forward, what I would really like to do, and Wayne and I discuss this all the time, I think the next couple of years, I'd really like to focus. I love teaching, right?
Yeah.
So I'm super excited to be able to have that opportunity with you guys. Yeah. I would like to focus on teaching a lot, because I think I am where I am because of the people that have taught me things. Wayne has taught me things, and the folks that I mentioned earlier that I've taken classes from. I'd like to focus on teaching, but also in that time, I want to focus on incrementally improving our process. So if and when the time comes when I decide what I'm doing for my day job is not for me, and I want to try to go full time and do this, I can seamlessly make that transition. We bought one of my proudest things, and I don't think I've gotten to tell you about this, and I know you like old stuff, so we bought a Ober number 11 irregular duplicating lathes. So once we get it running in the belts and all that stuff, having to like find canvas belts for a 130-year-old
McMaster car.
Do they have canvas belts?
Yes.
Good.
They have belting.
Good.
And they have the machine to
and that you can buy
it. You can buy whatever you want from McMaster Car. I didn't know about McMaster Car 2 years ago. I now have no idea how I ran a business.
Yep, there it is. That's it.
That's it.
Yep.
Make it bigger. I want to.
So it's actually it was originally intended for.
I want one. Where'd you get it?
Gun stock. Well, I got it from the mountains of North Carolina or the mountains of Tennessee. Sure. My friend Ryan Johnson turned me on to it. So it was.
Was that a pun? Did you just make a lathe pun by saying it turned you on to it?
No, but that's really good.
That's good.
I can't wait to use it again. I have way too many puns. It's 130 years old, right? And I got it from my friend Ryan. Turned me on to it because I've been hunting one since I started doing this. I was like, why don't I just make my own handles? Right. And I do carve some of my own handles, but when you're looking at like production times, right? Yeah. Luckily, with not a product plug, but with my cold press, I can forge one axe, or I can forge 6 or 7 of them in the same time. Right. Just by cycling heats. Yeah. And so I can forge 1 or 5 or 6 axes in about 40 minutes. But then if I want to carve a handle, I'm looking at another 45 minutes, and I love it. It's so therapeutic carving a handle.
Agreed.
And I say carve, I use that loosely. I cut it on a bandsaw and then I rip it with a 36 grit belt.
It's still carving.
At 2450 RPM. There's not much carving going on, and it's a blast, right? I love that part, but it's just not feasible when my time is already limited in the shop. Right. So I've been hunting one of these for years. Yeah. And, I know some folks that have sold them, but usually when they sell them, they're sold before they sell them. Right. And so my friend Ryan's like, hey, I know this guy that makes walking sticks. He's like, this guy is the Ober lathe Yoda. I mean, that's what he is. He wrote a book on him. Like, he's just...
Does he have a phone number that you can share with me?
Yes, I will share his contact. But I still owe him... I owe him a Viking axe in trade for some patterns, so I probably need to get that done before I do it. But so this one has multiple units, but ours is just a single, right?
Okay. Is that an Ober? Is that a new Ober? That looks like
almost looks like a Baki or something, like an older Baki.
Okay.
But either way, there's a video on there. I think I say ours is it an 11? An Ober number 11? Yeah. There's a YouTube video where he's running it and he's running a walking stick. So anyway, we drive to the mountains of North Carolina or Tennessee. I keep saying North Carolina. We drive to the mountains. It's up. I'm pulling a flatbed trailer, and guys, I drive a Honda Ridgeline. It's not something that's going to have a lot of hauling power. But let's say even just pulling the small trailer, my truck was like, "What are you doing?" You're winding through these roads, and they're like this wide. You know. So anyway, there's the one that Beaver Tooth runs, and it is an Ober number 11. So anyway, it's got that cutter head, and so we drive in the mountains of Tennessee. I can't stop
literally
saying that.
Every time.
I know. I think I'm so used to talking about John C. Campbell and the mountains of North Carolina.
Sure.
And so this guy's got a setup, and I end up buying this lathe from him. And essentially, we're talking. I'm like, hey, the majority of what I make are 16-inch camp axes. They're what sell the easiest, and I've pretty well got that system down. And so the goal is for us to improve our process by being able to make these handles, make our handles in-house. I'm not really looking to supply the market for handles because there's so many great handle suppliers. I mean, like when you got folks like Whiskey River Trading that's pumping out premium heritage patterns, like the real slim, curvy ones. I mean, there's no need to muddy those waters, but make my own handles, be able to really improve that process. We've got a great lumber supply especially for hickory nearby.
Awesome.
So, what I would like to do is be able to have handles on hand that we have produced. Yeah. And keep improving our die system with our presses. I got a lot of die ideas that I hope you and I are going to discuss when this is over today. Yeah. Improve that process. So eventually when that happens in the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever time frame that's on, depending on what life throws at me, that way I can go into this and be like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm set. I'm already ahead of the game because I'm lucky enough that Wayne and I share a shop and I already had access to, like we were talking about earlier, I've had a little giant power hammer since I was, 11 years old, and, so that, I'm already ahead of the game. I already have a lot of the things I need. I don't have this big investment startup cost, right? So, I would like to do this full time one day. Yeah. But I don't think I will enjoy this to the level of doing that until it is what I do full time.
Sure. So you are primarily hoping to maintain the quantity to sustain, you guys working together, but you're not looking to really are you hoping to broaden what you make, or are you really in the vein you think you'll continue in?
I think that's a really good question. I've had this conversation with other makers before, right? Because I can get burned out quick, right? So I would like to diversify a little bit, right? I love garden tools. I love garden tools because
when you say garden tools, can you tell me exactly what you mean?
I would love to. I would love to shamelessly plug my Hori garden knives. So I love making these Hori-Horis, right? In my opinion, when it comes to tools, the Japanese have it figured out. Sure. I mean, their tools are so superior to most Western tools. Sure. And I'd handled a couple of these, and my mom is an avid gardener. She's taken master gardener stuff on this. And she was like, you should make one of these Hori knives. And I'm like, that is not a nice thing to call your son. and so I had to, is that Homer Simpson? Okay. Bart Simpson, appropriate. So anyway, I looked it up, and the first one I made, I overbuilt the snot out of it. The first one, I had the prototype. It's from 3/16, 1095. It is I made it so sharp, it'll cut paper and stuff like that. And then so what I've done is I've refined that process. So I make we make a ton of hori-hori knives in comparison to axes, mainly because they're more marketable, right?
Sure.
Even $70 for a garden tool, most people would see as expensive,
Sure.
but for $70, you're getting a tool that's made in the United States.
Yeah.
I can tell you exactly what every material on it is, where it comes from. I can tell you how it's heat treated. I can tell you just basically the tool's limits if you want to look at it that way. So I really like garden tools. I've started to make some they kind of look like they're like a hook for weeding. Those are really fun. I made some asparagus forks this year. That was really cool. A lot of people, they're basically a long stick with a flat piece that has a V grind in it.
Okay.
And a lot of people, they're supposed to be used for harvesting asparagus, but nobody grows their asparagus because it takes 3 years to get. Yeah, there they are. Time. It takes 3 years to get.
I have one of those.
So I got this idea. We got to be careful because I can go down the garden tool thing for ever. I know you guys have a lot of really cool knife makers talking about their awesome tools. Well, let's talk about garden tools for a minute. My neighbor is an elderly lady who does a ton of. She's retired, so what she does is she gardens. And her garden is her yard, her everything. It's like Martha Stewart. It's impeccable. She uses one of those for weeding. Yeah, that's what she uses for. Every weed, dandelions, everything.
Yep, that's what we use ours for.
And I'm like, this is a great tool, and it's simple. Like that one that Evan pulled up, I forged that from. It's W1,
okay,
which is super cheap. You know, it's like 3/8 W1, and so it's there's a small little Japanese.
Just scythe?
Yeah, like a little. I got that idea from. I also dabbled in bonsai for a long time. Bonsai, and the folks that I was involved with in an organization and a club, they're incredible people. They're the nicest people ever. Bogan's Bonsai in Linville, Indiana. Not a plug. They use these for when you're going to repot. You run these along the pots, and what that does is that separates the roots if they've grown up against the pots and stuff. Yeah. So anyway, I thought that'd be fun, and you can take it and hold it and slice some weeds. But so to me, a garden tool is so much more marketable, right? It applies to so many people, right? Not a lot of people have a use for a hatchet, right? But think about how many people just have pots of plants on there.
Sure.
You go to Lowe's on a Saturday in the spring, and it's like there's so many people.
Is that one of yours?
Yeah, I lost that one. That was my juniper. It's a Shimpaku juniper. It was about 11 years old. And that one, we had a really bad heat wave in Indiana, southern Indiana last summer, and the heat killed every bonsai tree that I had. It was awful. And I was having work done on my house, so it was just like it was Benton's fault. That's what it was. But but anyway, so I can sell a $70 tool to someone who wants to do gardening a lot easier than I can sell an axe that starts at $175. Right. So I love garden tools. I mean, I like gardening, but they're just so marketable, and it's really interesting, right? Because I'm not scared to share this because I'm an open book and I don't have secrets about my processes and things. But my axes I'm forging them. Everything is, but my garden tools are like a mid-tech type of operation, right? My garden tools they're plasma cut, right? And then I forge them, right? And then we heat treat them and put handles on them. So it's it's this mid-tech operation. For me, that's really fancy because I'm not like a mid-tech guy or anything like that, with knives and so it's really fun, and it mixes things up. It diversifies my time, and it's something that while I'm at work during the day, Wayne can cut handles, right? Or or if we've got them forged, Wayne can run my heat treat cycles for me. Yeah. And so it's something nice that mixes it up. I want to make more garden tools. I want to make, What's
the holy grail garden tool that you're like, I want to learn how to make this? Is there one tool that you're like obsessing?
Yeah.
There's something.
It'd be bonsai scissors.
Oh yeah.
I made one set, and they turned out okay, right?
But I feel like with scissors, I'm very interested in scissors. I feel like with scissors, it's the last 0.5% that takes like 100 years of experience to dial.
And especially the fact that you have to have those blades where they have the slightest curve so they cut.
Yeah.
And it's so difficult.
Have you seen the Japanese, I can't remember the name of it, where they cut caricatures out of paper and they have these extremely precise, I can't remember what they're.
That's a really rough one. That one didn't work out. That was out of mild steel, but, and that was another one out of mild steel. I have some, I will be completely honest with you guys. I lost the pair that it was ready. No. They were ready to hot rivet together. And in our defense, for the most part, our shop is like Florida in hurricane season.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just, and that's why we work so well, because it's a mess.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you where they are. They're ready to be riveted together and give a test run, and I lost them.
They're in here somewhere.
They're gone. They are in the dark abyss, probably never to be found again.
Oh no.
But you know, to me, like, I even posted on a Facebook group I'm in with some really knowledgeable smiths, especially about machinery and stuff. I should probably add you that group. And I asked about drop hammers, right?
Oh yeah.
And because I don't know if you've seen Josh Burrell.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He, I think he has the scissor dies for his drop. Yeah. His like 100 cubic weight, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that's how those were made. And I was thinking, like, I have these weird harebrained ideas, right? Like, my friends and my family, bless their hearts, because they put up with this. Like, I'm walking through CVS in Destin, Florida, and I'm waiting. I'm just waiting on some other folks, and I see, you know, they have like little scissors hanging on the thing, like, you know, for like us to trim our nose hairs with or something. And I think that's cool. And then it's like, oh, these are tailored towards men, or like these are tailored towards like, you know, like heritage, like shaving needs. And I'm like, those ain't heritage, you know. But I'm like, why couldn't I make that?
Right.
And then so as I'm walking through CVS, clearly not being a normal person, I'm thinking like, okay, so these are really small. So like, what kind of weight would you have to build a drop hammer? Sure. Where you could do that, where its only purpose was for these little scissors. And then I'm like, oh my gosh. And then you could like sandblast them, and then you could grind the flanges off. And I'm going down this rabbit hole for something that would probably cost like $60. And you know what I mean? And you know, I don't know if you've seen, I'm going to try to say his name. I speak some Norwegian, but he's Swedish, and some of these names are hard to say. Torbjörn Amund?
Yeah. He'll probably have a press at some point.
Oh, yeah. Very cool. I would love to meet him. If you guys ever have him here, I would love to meet him. He does a really cool scissor video. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't seen that one, no.
And he walks through the process of tuning them at the end.
Okay.
And
I'll have to check that out.
Oh, his YouTube channel is one of my favorites. Yeah. But he talks about tuning the scissors at the end, and he's got them through, you know, they're already tempered, sharp, everything, and he's just tapping them with a cross peen between two bars to slowly put in a little bit of that concave, you know. So long story short, bonsai scissors would be my holy grail tool that I would love to make. I also,
how much does a pair of good bonsai scissors cost?
Probably $500 to $1,000.
Okay.
You know, and those are, I think they're Masakunes. I think that's what they are.
Okay.
Still handmade in Japan. There's some really cool, like, you know, you see those videos on Facebook where it's like, info this, and it's like, this Japanese maker has been making, you know, and there's a really great video about someone who makes different types of bonsai scissors or shears or whatever you prefer to call them. And they are like, I've just like chewed in my head so many times, like just chewed on it. And I'm like, how would I make the dies where I could just, because if I'm going to do it, I want to make it easy. You know what I mean? Right. Like I'm lazy in the sense of efficiency, right? Like that's why like I'm constantly, Wayne and I are constantly talking about dies for the axe, for making axes. I'm like, I want to make this. Like if you watch the Grands Fours or the Haltefors or the Haltsbruck, and you know they have that stage die system where they're just, you watch the guy and he's like listening to music in his headphones and he's just going down like you know, working that axe all the way one heat all the way down. I'm like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, and when you get into production forging like that, you know, when we were at Warwood looking at their die sets, and you know they're forging these hammers, and you know. I have a friend down in southern Indiana, right on the Kentucky border, that worked at...
Where at?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Because we are on the Kentucky border.
Well, his name's... I'll Oh my gosh, my brain. Jeff Reinhardt.
Yeah. Okay.
you've
Yeah.
met
He's
Jeff.
over by Louisville. Yeah.
Okay. So
He just retired.
He did. So when he was working at Voigt, he was talking about when they got slow on the steam valves, they started forging hammers. And he was talking about, in that context, all of the material coming in the door is certified. Everything's double checked. Mm-hmm. They're doing material analysis on stuff. Mm-hmm. They're putting it into these hammers, but when they're designing their dies, they're thinking about material flow and what is that material's structure going to be post forging.
Yes.
And so there are things that, on a small scale blacksmith shop, it's very difficult to think about material flow, but there's a grain to this material that we can leverage to end up with an even stronger, better piece. And so, it's really interesting to jump in on that. There is some simulation software. We were just at where were we? Forged Association up in Detroit. I think we were in Detroit, and they were showing us this simulation software where you tell it what material, how the starting billet shape is, and then you put your CAD model die set in, and it will literally forge it in simulation and show you where you have vulnerabilities in the material flow and all kinds of fun stuff that we can play with. But the advantage at that scale is, they've got the infrastructure. They're literally trying to utilize capacity they've already built in. Mm-hmm. When you're on a smaller scale, you're doing lower volume stuff, you have to move material at a whole different level. I mean, 25 ton. So at Gransford Brucks, we've talked to them. Gransford Brucks is, I think, 180 ton presses usually. So not crazy. Mechanical flywheel, when they're going through and doing the rhythm.
That's a large mechanical.
Yeah,
right? There's no hydraulics.
Correct. That's a large mechanical press, and they had a couple at Warwood. I'll show you some pictures on my phone for their Matic forging. They have a decommissioned press that had. It has a clamping system like Gransford does for their punching operation, but it's 5 inches thick.
Oh my gosh!
And that's the wedge that comes down and actuates the clamshell to close on the die. I don't know what the tonnage was. This press was a monster.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, it was probably 14 feet tall. Flywheel was 7 feet in diameter.
I just can't imagine running a piece like that.
Well, and that stuff is. They're doing really, really high production. So when you're in a production environment like that, you cannot afford downtime. Downtime might be $1,000 a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like, no, we have to produce at this insane volume so everything's overbuilt so that it's constant and repeatable to a degree that's so outside the scope of a small mom and pop shop.
Right.
So what I've encountered on the flip side of this is, if I'm talking to somebody about doing some OEM forging or something, building up this production process, we break it up into small bite-sized die sets with easy changeover where we'll do small batch, high mix, which is the Toyota way. You do really affordable machines, but you have a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And in Toyota, everything's on wheels. So when they're going to change process over, they'll clear a floor and bring their machines. They'll bring their mills on wheels over to their little operation and they'll set it up and they'll do that little small batch work and then they'll tear everything down and change the tooling over and move it over to the next process. So they're utilizing high versatility, low cost equipment that's easily mobile. And that for a forging operation is like, this press weighs 150,000 pounds. I can't move it.
Yeah, you can't put that on wheels.
I have a picture of a 35,000 pound drop hammer that has literally 100 feet of cast iron underneath it.
Oh my gosh.
It looks like an iceberg. I mean, it's like, so you have this infrastructure. So what we're trying to do right now for the industrial side is how can we bite-size production so that not only are we doubling up the market because it's like small forging shops like yourself can leverage what we're learning, use it. The really fast change die sets, I'm still doing it. The really fast change die sets allow you to do 5, swap your dies, move over to the next. So you're not getting these big batches where you've got all this tooling time and setup. Henry Ford, when he was doing his stamping operations, he would set up a stamping operation. He would have the die set designed. He'd build the press around the die set. And that's why when his son was telling him, you have to change models. And he was like, no, I don't think so. Yeah. We're just going to keep selling these, and almost put him out of business. And when they did their actual changeover to their next model, what was their first model? Model T. Mm-hmm. When they went from the T to the A, they had to shut down for like a year.
That's a ton of money lost.
You're talking about 100,000 employees.
Yeah.
They're shutting down to retool everything. And when they're retooling, they're like decommissioning entire factories. And, so part of that was him. He didn't think he needed to change. But some of it was also this idea, like the cost of changeover is too much. So when Toyota came around, when Taiichi Ohno was looking around at the Ford factories, he was like, we can't do this. We don't have the money. Mm-hmm. We don't even have the square footage. This factory wouldn't fit in Japan,
right? Yeah.
So he had a really interesting mindset, but we can really leverage that idea now and say, okay, how can I bite size these into smaller operations where I can use lower tonnage mobile presses? I can move them around. I can rearrange them. We were looking at Warwood, they've got these huge drop hammers and stuff, but then they bring supplemental equipment around it that they can move around the shop. This press is over here, and then they can move it over here, and that trim press can do 15 different models.
Right.
And that is where you can build in flexibility into your forging operation, and you've got some investment, but the investment's a lot smaller. You're not buying a $50,000 press. You're buying, two $5,000 presses, and you can retool them in a matter of minutes or seconds.
And you have that ubiquity of it. It's everywhere around you always.
Right. Well, and there's some really fun books. If you've ever heard of Shingo, I think his name's Shigeo Shingo, but Shingo has a ton of books that he's written, and one of them's about the single minute exchange of dies in the stamping shops when they're stamping car bodies. It might take 8 days to do a changeover, because not only do you have to move this massive piece of equipment in, yes, it's SMED, SMED, single minute exchange of dies. And he came up with this whole idea, and you see in that picture, there's a little tool table with that next die set.
Little stamp press.
They weren't doing that. They were decommissioning this die set, moving it out of the machine. So he came up with, no, we're going to have 1 minute to change this die set out. So while this machine's running, it's automatic, it's being part fed. These guys are just setting up the tools, getting everything ready. And when it's time to change, it opens, unlocks, slides out, new slides in. They do a single hit test. They might do a couple hits to test, and they'll put a little lead sheet in there, and they'll measure the thickness of the sheet to make sure everything's hitting square.
Oh, wow.
All kinds of fun stuff.
It's like a NASCAR pit crew, man.
It is. And it's set up, and they're changed over, and they're making the next part. And what that allows them then to do is they can run in smaller batch sizes, because if it takes you a day to change dies over, you're going to make a lot of parts.
Absolutely.
Well, now you've got all this inventory, and your material cost is not free.
Right.
And so if I can't sell it because it's in work in process, then it's not an asset.
No.
It's costing me money to
it's
sit here.
It's eating something at that point.
So that changeover time is why we do the quick change dies. And, there's limitations to that we've bumped up into, and getting higher accuracy and repeatability. We've really been working on that a lot recently. And I'll show you, I've got some stuff that I'll send home with you.
Oh, cool.
So pit crews do use the SMED system.
Of course they do. Freaking,
oh, wow.
Right there. There it is. SMED. It sounds like a bad word, but
it's just like moist. That's what you say, SMED, and I'm like, and there's some words I can think of, but this is for everyone to listen to. But there's some words I can think of that are similar to that, and it just makes me cringe,
Yeah. But so that, in industry, when you now go to a GM plans to look at their stamping operations, everything's automated, and the die sets are on automatic machines that know what dies to go pull, and they'll go in and pick them up and run them over on their magnetic trailing system. I mean, just, we've taken it to an extreme, but in a small home shop.
Absolutely.
And somebody that, if you want to scale up productivity, we can talk about die sets, and we can talk about versatility and quick changeover. And, what does happen is you do spend more in the die set itself. Yeah, you see those corner posts.
Yep. That's for alignment. Yeah.
I mean, they are doing that's freaking. I get really into this.
See, I look at some of this stuff, right? Because I know other axe makers use this. Like, Brant Cochran has an awesome setup. They haven't. I think their eye punching setup is probably one of the. I love it because you can look at it and you're like, they get straight eyes every time. You know what I mean? They're punching center and straight eye every time.
I don't know if I'm allowed to tell you this. but we are building their next production process, because he came to me and he was like, hey, well, actually I reached out to him because I wanted him to try out our DPC, because like, I think this is going to improve your employee training process. And he called me back and he's like, I need to 10X my production.
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
Did you guys share some pictures on social media of working on dies or something recently?
Yeah.
I saw that and I was like, ooh, I wonder who they're working on axes.
Yeah, so we
can you make 2 of them?
we're working on some stuff, and I'll show you what we're working on, because it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
And I'm a process guy. Process is like all creativity and exploration. So
and they're evidently super nice guy. I've
the BNC guys are flipping awesome.
Their axes are so good looking. Like there's just something aesthetically about those axes.
Clean.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys do the lugs. I love that they are not doing lugs.
I love a lugless
because if
axe,
you can have you ever tried to forge a lugless axe?
So I have.
In the tushy.
I just called it a Hoosier pattern, right? Or not a Hoosier pattern. A Yankee pattern. I've done a couple of them probably within the last year.
Yeah.
I think an axe looks way better without lugs, right? But the only reason I do lugs is because it's a hell of a lot easier.
I love lugs. But now that I know how difficult it is to forge a lugless axe, now I'm all lugless, because it's harder.
It is.
When you draw your material, you got to do something with it.
This was a nightmare to do too. This is a Rhineland that I did.
Yeah.
It was fun, but you really, and not to go down like the axe rabbit hole, but I guess that's why we're here. When
the axe hole.
The axe hole. When you try to forge a lugless eye, right?
Yeah.
The most crucial part for me is when you're punching an eye, and then when you drift that eye, right? Because there's a multitude of things that can go wrong that you don't even know go. Like an eye can be straight. Yeah, there was a hatchet that I did. An eye can be not straight, and it's gonna not come out straight, but you can't see it unless the only way you know it is if how you squished, and then you're like, that one's gonna come out wookity. You know what I mean? So when you're trying to do a lugless eye or a lugless pattern axe, how you are drifting and fullering that eye is completely different, right? Because even in the class, which I've demoed for you guys in the video, the process I do is simple. You punch the eye, and then you knock a drift in it, and you drift it from the center up the drift on both sides, and then you pick what you want to be top or bottom, and you grind that off. Right. Not on a lugless axe, you know? And so for me, I found when you're trying to do these lugless axes and stuff, it's you're not using any rounding die. You're not using the round dies. You got to really utilize your taper dies, because you're also going to have to grow the eye instead of growing it how tall that eye is with the lugs and the cheeks. You have to grow it
in length
because it's the only way that I found, which I could be very wrong. I've been wrong about a lot of things in my life, but that's the only way you can maintain of not getting those. I think you're still going to have some flange that some that you're going to have to grind and clean up, but Maybe. Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah. We'll just see.
I don't know how many secrets we'll reveal in the podcast, but I'll show you.
Okay.
I'll show you how to get there. I discovered it. I was working with a guy trying to do these axes, and he had asked for a lugless axe, and I was like, oh yeah, that should be fine. I'll just grind them off. Nope. I was like, I don't like that. I'm not going to grind these off. And so I started experimenting, and it's all about geometry.
Yep.
100%.
Yep.
And
it's a huge bottleneck if you have to grind off lugs.
I don't like the way it looks. I think if you can get there, and that's one of those things that, I was at Jason Knight's class recently with Will Stelter's class at Jason Knight.
I saw that.
And he was like, this last 2% of effort, or it was the last 20% of effort gives 2% of value or something like that. And he's like, you really got to watch out for that diminishing return. And I started thinking about, stuff like this is definitely rabbit trail for people that are interested in forging. Yeah. But, what I found was if I start with a shorter hole and only stretch it in length with my drift. So I taper my drift in length, but not in width. Right. I can actually stretch and pull the material. Right. And you don't get any lugs. And I get no lugs. Yeah. And that works. But there are other ways I found out later. But that one was successful. I would say though, it's still very dependent on accuracy. The accuracy level with a lugless axe seems to be a lot higher. Because I've also found if I have an off-center eye, I'll just forge it down and grind off. My lugs are like this.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll just grind that off at, Bob's your uncle. But no, with a lugless axe, you just can't.
You don't have the margin of error.
Well, and if you do, then you're looking at it and it's squirrely.
Yeah.
So Adam Savage calls it, you can hide your crimes, and with process and stuff like that. But in my experience, forging lugless axes, it's like, no, you don't have that. There's nowhere to hide.
And it's, your margin of error in forging axes it's a really interesting dynamic for me, right? Because the flaws that I see in an axe as someone that produces hundreds of axes a year, or 100 axes or so a year, is not a flaw probably that most people would see, right? But like, I see my flaws and I'm like, I can hide some of them, right? And they're not a structural or a functional flaw, but there's just something like my eye doesn't like that.
Well, you're saying to yourself, my forging process wasn't perfect here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we find that, like, for example, on a recent batch that we did, something that we battle all the time, and it drives me nuts. And I'm trying to improve my process. I made some taper dies that I thought would maybe correct this. Your axe is done, right? And so the final thing I do when I forge an axe, after I punch and relatively drift the eye, I don't touch the eye until the last heat after that, because otherwise it's just going to get all wonky anyway. Right. And it's wasted heat. It's wasted time. So you get to your last heat, second to last heat, because the last heat's stamping, but you get to your last heat and you drift it from the top and the bottom to create your hourglass eye. And then you check it on the drift. And I'll check in on my drift. I use Brent Bailey's drifts because they're beautiful. They are beautiful. Yeah. I mean, that is the best, like $170 or whatever it is.
If Brent Bailey is listening, please call me. I would like to buy all of them.
Thank you for providing excellent tools. And he's just a super nice guy too. Yeah. But I'll check my axe and I'll check it and I'm like, straight. Put it in from the top, check it. And I'm like, straight. And then we'll get all the way through the grind, the heat treat, all this stuff. Got a really nice looking axe. And I'll check my handle and I've got a really nice handle, and I drive the head on after it's, a nice, like, loose but tight fit. Yeah. And I look and it's like, it's crooked. And I'm like, how did this happen? I checked it on the drift. And so that's a real, like, I'd say the two biggest bottlenecks in our process, in our forging process. The first one is after you punch and drift the eye, picking your top or your bottom, and then taking the time to go grind those lugs off, right? Because I've gotten where I do it hot, but even with a hot billet and ceramic belts, you're going through belts way faster than you normally would.
You need a stone.
I do need a stone. I need a big stone wheel that, I don't care if it's powered by an ox walking in circles. I need it. That's bottleneck one, right? And bottleneck two is getting all the way finished. Like, I got to ship this axe tomorrow. And you're like, great, I'm making great time. I'll hang it. I'm done. Because, all my leather stuff is all like, clicker press stuff. And then you put it on the handle and you don't have it wedged yet. And you're like, I have to straighten this. I have to heat this up, ruin my heat treat, reheat treat, normalize all this stuff. And it's very frustrating, right? And so, like, we've tried to come up with ways to battle this, right? Making some tape. I had some taper dies made and I thought, okay, if I'm putting this axe in these taper dies and I'm squishing it, if there's any kind of whatever, it'll straighten it out. Even with the drift, drift in it. And at that point, I'm using like Holland Namel's little shorty drifts. That creates another problem because then you get a curve and you're, and it's just chasing bottlenecks and chasing problems in procedure. And that's all I have learned, that not only blacksmithing, but when you're producing consumer goods instead of some custom pieces, that's what it is. It's just chasing that. So,
well, and making the same thing more than once, it's like you can create one perfect one, but the pursuit of doing 100 it completely changes the dynamic. And it's not, in my experience, I'd like to tell people, and I've said this to Evan before, and it drives him and David nuts. Quantity is quality.
Yeah.
Because when you've made 1,000 of something, you're going to be better than if you take a really long time on the first one.
Absolutely.
You know, every farrier I've talked to is like, yeah, ask me again when when you've made 10,000 horseshoes.
Absolutely.
It's like, you can't get there from here without doing it.
It's the same with I know you like to make hammers. You're a hammer guy.
Yeah.
Punching an eye, right?
Yeah.
Like when I first started this, like I was so worried, like, we had constantly worried, like we have to make sure, like we got to develop something where we're getting a directly center punch every time. Mm-hmm. And now, like, if somebody comes out there and they're like, okay, what do we got to do to line up? I'm like, well, just kind of, you just do it, right? You know, I mean, are my eyes like perfectly center? No, but I mean, they're pretty dang close. Yeah. And for me, it's just like I'm just watching it in the dies and I'm like, that looks pretty good. Yeah. And it's, whereas I remember the day I came home when we drove up here and got our press from you guys, I went home and I had a piece of 1 1/4 square bar, 4140. Mm-hmm. And I was like, all right, cool. I'm gonna make like a little hammer pole hatchet. And like the first piece that I punched, and I was just like, that's got to get thrown in the woods. It was bad. And so then I did a second one and it was much better. And it's always interesting when you look at your pieces that you made a couple of years ago and you remember thinking when you made it, like, that's a nice axe. And then like my customers will send one back for like just like a tune up or, something like that. And I'm like, dear God, how did I ever let this go out the door? And like, to me at that time, it looked, fantastic. And now I look at it, I'm like, oh God, you know.
Well, it's the development of your eye along with your capability.
Absolutely.
You expect more of yourself as you get better. I have original tongs and hammers and stuff. And I have one of my first hammers downstairs that gets passed around the shop. They use it out in production, but it's like, I remember punching everything by hand. Mm-hmm. On average, it takes about 2 hours for me to do about a 2.5 inch square, to get a hole in it, to get it to full size. Yeah. And yesterday we had a Forging Friday class with the team. And we were making hammers, making A33 hammers. A33 doesn't forge real well.
That's hard.
But I had everybody hand drifting.
Yeah.
And basically we spent the whole time hand drifting. And then right at the end, Evan brought out a hammer eye punch. We put it in the punch collet and said, why don't you just like finalize your shape with this? And even the guys who were just getting their punch through, put it in there, punched the eye, and it was done. And they're like, why didn't we start with this?
Now you appreciate it.
But now you appreciate it. That's now you know why this tool exists. And that's the whole point of our training class with the team. But I still am doing this. We're gonna have to get a different table.
You're gonna have to get a wood table.
I'm gonna have to get a big solid wood table.
I talk about that all the time too with folks when
getting wood tables.
Getting wood tables, yes. Some nice wood. Very woody wood. Yeah. I remember when I started this.
Yeah.
When I started doing this, I was like, I'm going to do everything by hand.
Yeah. Right? Oh, yeah.
And especially tomahawks, that's more doable with the tomahawk, right? You can forge your standard tomahawk with a 2-pound cross beam, and you're really not going to beat the dog snot out of yourself, right? But then, same here when I would punch a camp hatchet from a 1x2x4 block of 4140 in a coal forge, it takes 2 hours. It takes 2 hours to punch and drift that eye. And so when I'm explaining that difference to people, right? I'm like, you just don't understand when you get something like a coal ironworks press, not just because I like you guys and you guys have me here, but really, folks like, well, does it make that much of a difference? Mm-hmm. And I tell them, I'm like, this would take me 2 hours. Yep. Or I can go on a coal ironworks press, or anybody can go on a press or a power hammer if you have the throat to put a punch in it, and it's done in one heat in 38 seconds, and it just completely changes everything. But I don't, like you said, you don't have that appreciation if you haven't spent that time wearing yourself. Like I can remember forging a camp axe and punching and drifting it from, I think I did one. It was actually a 3, I think it was like it was a monster. I can't remember. It was a monster block, and I had our little giant, but I had to punch it by hand. Mm-hmm. And at that point, all of my friends were no longer stupid in the sense of I couldn't be like, what are you doing tonight? Because like all my friends were like played baseball and stuff, so they have like amazing hand-eye coordination, right? But they realized that when I would ask them on a Friday night, like, you want to
come over?
You want to have a couple beers?
Yeah.
And they realized I was getting ready to ask them to swing a sledgehammer for me.
Right. Well, the secret is you just provide the beer, and while they're just sitting there talking to you, you just pull the billet out of the forge, set it on the anvil,
Can you
and
help me
hand
real
them.
quick?
Hey, just hand them a hammer.
Yeah.
You don't even ask. You just say, hey, here you go.
Well, I feel like most dudes, they get a big hammer in their hand. They're like, oh yeah, this is cool.
yeah, buddy.
But like I remember just being dead after that. And and it's the same way with like I am a little spoiled in the sense of how long I've had access to a Little Giant, but I mean, even for a long time, we didn't use it when we moved to our current shop because we didn't have a foundation under it. And, so, we did everything by hand. And I can remember, so when I learned how to punch and drift axes at Liam Hoffman's class, it was myself and you had a striking partner that you flipped with, and mine was Steven Feinstein, who's an incredible blacksmith, and he's hysterical. We spent the whole weekend swinging the sledge. And I remember at the end of that weekend, I'm a paper pusher by day, right? I'm an Excel warrior by day. My hands hurt so bad that I had trouble gripping, anything. And I remember watching Liam's striker that he had with him. Like, the dude was just swinging it was like an 11 or, I don't know, it was a massive Aaron Sturgill coffee can looking sledge.
Yeah.
And he was swinging it like it was a one of those inflatable hammers you get at the county fair, and doing things like that has given me an immense appreciation for the process and the improvements of being able to be like, all I got to do is just turn that switch on and do some quick change dies and make sure my punch collet is really tight in the die. Yeah. It gives you such an appreciation for being able to improve that. I know for us, especially on like even like on our Little Giant, right? A Little Giant, if you don't have your teeth closed, a Little Giant will rattle your teeth right out of your mouth. Yeah. But for us, Wayne does a lot of handrails, a lot of fences, and sometimes we texture things, and sometimes we kind of cold texture them and things like that. But I can remember when we didn't have the foundation poured for that tool, right? And I think at that point we had really forgotten how much work that tool will do. Yeah. I can remember Wayne and I being out in the shop. We had just gotten our Whisper Daddy double port 3-burner propane forge, and running these handrail tops through the forge and through the ports, and taking giant cross beams, or I say giant, they're like 4-pound cross beams. At that time, they were giant cross beams to us, and using those to texture like 30 feet of handrails. Yeah. And like now I just realized like you can just 2-person tongs and run them through a power hammer and get that texture, so that just that appreciation for that is something that I think everybody experiences throughout their, probably any craft career, but especially in a blacksmithing career, because your shoulder and your wrists only last so long.
Well, metal's hard.
Oh man, that Atlantic 33, like that's another thing. You got to make sure your mouth is closed when you're hammering.
We were forging it, and I think we only got one guy full through heat treat, and he was playing with it on the anvil afterwards, and it was like, bouncing up off the anvil. He's like, how hard does this stuff get? It's like, well, pretty hard.
What temperature does it hold at its hardness through? I know H13 holds it up through like 1500.
Well, I don't know exactly what temperature, and A33 is weird. It's like small batch producer steel. So when you get the spec sheet with it, it's like, yeah, it's good.
It's written on a napkin from the diner.
Yeah, on a little note. It's like, yeah, it's good. We checked. Yeah. So it's one of those things where, but that's the point of A33. Right. A33 is considered an obsolete steel by the forging industry because we've come up with we have so much equipment readily available to us at this point. The point of it initially was a lot of these forge shops didn't have accurate machinery to heat treat.
Right.
So when you forge it, you get it about this color, and then you dunk it in water. It's like,
just the old way.
So it's just really forgiving. Yeah. The temperature range on it's great. I mean, my Brent Bailey drift is A33. I think he said it was A33.
It's either A33 or H13 because it feels like either one of those.
It's really hard, and it stays really nice and hard, and it wears well. And so. What are you putting up there?
This is the heat treat sheet.
There he is.
Well, it's a heat treat sheet, but
there's
how
Evan for
long
everyone.
does it stay hard? That's a hard question to answer.
That's a weird one to ask too.
God bless it. So it even when it's showing temperature, it's remains pretty hard. I would say we're experimenting with tungsten punches and stuff, but they scare the crap out of me. I know Yuri
They
Hoffe,
explode, don't they?
Well, the late Yuri Hoffe,
Yeah.
he would go and collect anti-tank rounds, which are carbide, and he said when he started doing that, they were like Rockwell 30.
Yeah.
But they stay Rockwell 30, and the
Right.
stuff we're using downstairs, I have a punch downstairs that's 80.
You at the hammer
Rockwell
end,
80. Did I hand it to you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It felt like it was like
It feels like unobtainium.
yeah, it's just immensely
Well,
dense.
so funny story. We just got a call from this company, and I can't give any details, but they forge platinum alloys. And they were like, can you guys sell us a press to forge platinum?
Yes.
I was like, of course. I
Yeah.
could forge that with my thumb, you know? False.
Interesting.
Hugely false.
I think of it in the precious metal state. That's what I think of.
So they called us. And we were like, why don't you bring out some billets? So they cast these billets of platinum alloy. 25 tons wasn't even beginning to be enough, and that was at 2,400 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
It felt like I was forging a rock.
That's so strange.
And as soon as I squished it, I knew I had no idea what I was up against. So we forged out these billets. It took me 2 hours to move it 1/4 of an inch.
oh my gosh. That's
Well, the other
insane.
thing with these high crazy alloy stuff though is I could forge it out really quick on drawing dies. It explodes and fractures into a million pieces. So we had to come up with this die set for them that cradles the material while you move it because it can't bend at all. If it bends at all, it just falls apart.
Interesting.
Really wild
It's like
stuff.
D2 crumbles like a Chips Ahoy cookie.
Does
if you
it?
don't-
I've got some 6-inch round D2 down there, but I haven't done anything
It's
with it yet.
it's got a really narrow forging window.
Yeah.
It literally crumbles like a Chips Ahoy
Really?
cookie. That's what it looks like. Yeah. And
I've had some experience of S7 doing that to me too. I got it above its forging range.
Maybe I just suck at forging.
Yeah.
those crazy
That's
tools
a
like
whole-
that.
Okay, so
that's a great transition.
Evan is telling us now we have to tell me about this upcoming class. What is it called? When is it? What are we doing?
Okay, so it is. This is an excellent transition because we're talking about forging tools and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So this is. We're just calling this your guys' 2023 axe intensive. So the idea is it's not really like it is the accent. It is an axe intensive class, right? And I've been wanting to offer something like this for a while.
Yeah.
Basically, this class, one of the things that I was always so apprehensive about is forging my own tooling. Right?
Yeah.
That's why, like, even now, I don't use I have one drift that I use that
Yeah.
I made, and it's for like saddle axe, you know.
Yeah.
So students are going to get to, not only are they going to learn how to forge axes on your guys' presses, which is pretty nice. So they're going to start off. They're going to forge a drift that they'll be able to use. Now this drift's going to be from 4140, so it's not it's going to be good and tough. H13 would be ideal, but I don't want to turn anybody loose on forging a drift from H13 for the first time because it is a nightmare. But so students are going to get to forge an actual drift, and then what they do is once they forge that drift, they're going to make 2 sizes of axes. Okay, they're going to make a small camp axe, which usually comes out to the dimensions that we use. They're going to be about 1.75 pounds, right?
Okay.
So you're going to punch and drift this axe, and then once you get that one forged, which is a fun process, then they will move on to a bigger boy. I'm not going to say it's a big boy, but it's a bigger boy, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be from a 1x2x4 most likely. I might increase that size a little bit, but it should land you about 2.75 to 3 pounds.
Yeah.
And you're going to do the same thing. So not only that, you're going to forge your drift that you can, I assume they can take home and take with them.
Yeah.
But you're learning how to forge that drift, and you're learning how to okay, it's not just making something that's shaped like an axe eye, right? You're going to make something that is, you really got to think okay, do I want to put a handle on this? What's my setup like at home, really, right? Do you want to put a handle on this? I've got a drift that you guys made me that I really like. It works exceptionally well for doing like the Finnish and Swedish collared axes because it's got a long handle on it. Do you want to put a handle on it? Do you not want to put a handle on it like Brent doesn't, his? Do you want to make a shorty drift? I think we're going to probably do something with a handle. But anyway, so they'll be forging the tools to forge these axes. So every student is going to walk away with a drift, and then they're going to walk away with a completely forged, heat treated, sharpened, and hung on a handle, pound and 3/4 camp axe and a 2 3/4 pound camp axe. So the other one's probably more like a camp hatchet.
Okay.
But, so the students are going to have the ability to forge this in what I consider a very, very easily digested way, right? When you're doing this by hand for the first time, it's, I feel like you don't retain a lot. I mean, you do, but I don't feel like you retain as much because you're spending so much time just beating the crap out of yourself.
Yeah.
So, so this would be the, Coal Iron Works' axe intensive class. Unless you guys have somebody else teaching axes, which is fine. I'm just saying, but it's gonna be a fun class.
Yeah.
The idea is each of these projects is going to be a day. So your first day, I'll demo, and then they'll make their drift. The second day, I'll demo, and then they'll make their small camp axe.
Yeah.
And then the third day, I'll demo. It's a 5-day class, right, Evan? 4-day class. So the third day is going to be grind, heat treat, and put on a handle. So we'll probably do a quick and dirty heat treat, the old way. That way nobody has to wait for a couple hours in a heat treat oven or something like that. We do have
some very nice heat treat ovens.
I'm sure you guys have all the heat treat ovens.
We have a couple.
Yeah. You guys still have that Jenkins?
I have a Genkin. I have a Genkin, and we have a Genkin fiber, and then we also have a even heat, a big even heat.
Okay, awesome. Well, then maybe we could utilize those. And I think more importantly is that it's going to be an immersive axe experience, immersive axe experience, right?
Cool.
You're going to be able to take this class and you're going to be able to immerse yourself in the world of axes. Now, there are people that know so much more about axes than I do. Sure. Like in my opinion, Ryan Johnson knows the anatomy of a tomahawk better than anybody in this country. But I feel like I know I know enough about axes to be able to really make sure that these students come out with what they want, right? Yeah, because the coolest part of whether you're making a tomahawk, a folded eye axe, a drifted axe, everybody's axes look the same when you're punching and drifting or wrapping an eye. But it's after that point that everybody's axes are unique. Yeah. Everybody's mind's eye sees something different. So like I can show, we're just going to forge like a standard Scandinavian pattern. That's going to be the plan, right? Yeah. But it may not look that way. Somebody may come out with something completely different. Somebody make something real Viking-esque, something real fantasy. I mean, it's awesome to see, like, show students how to do something. And then it looks completely different because what they see as a normal axe isn't what you and I see.
Of course.
What you see and what I see are completely different, So it's going to be a really exciting and fun class. And I'm excited to be teaching here in Indiana.
It's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, it's going to be, I can't wait to squish all the things.
So where can people find out? People can find out about the class, coalschool.com. Where can people find out about Benton and River City Forge and Tool?
Great question. Preferably not the Vandenberg County bookings jail site. No, I'm just kidding. A couple different ways you guys can follow and see what we're doing, right? Instagram, which would be my Instagram is Frisse Forges with Fire. I like it because it's an alliteration, although most people can't say my last name, but that's fine. You can find me on there. I'm always posting things that we're doing, and stuff like that. Yeah. A lot of times on there and on Facebook, but everything I post on Instagram, I also post on Facebook at the same time because they're the same company. Yeah. But on Instagram, that's where I post like a lot of things I'm selling, a lot of things I'm working on, projects we're working on. I've also just recently started a YouTube channel.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. I'm not trying to retire with my YouTube channel by any means, but it's just a way for me to maybe provide some more educational content. Sure. So I've got some axe walkthroughs and some shorts and stuff about some tips and some shorts of Wayne doing some things on more of the fab forging side. So you can find me on both of those. You can also hit my website, which is rivercityforge.com. There's a contact us page. I post things for sale on there. I have just added a page. There should be a learn from River City Forge and Tool. So I actually posted our teaching schedule where I or Wayne and I will be teaching. Cool. So, we're at New England School of Metalwork in about 2 weeks, or I'll be up in New England School of Metalwork teaching an axe and tomahawk class. Then we're in North Carolina, at John C. Campbell teaching a throwing axe class. That one will be Wayne and I both. So we get to, eat snacks in the mountains, which will be nice. And then, of course, in June we'll be here. So
very cool, awesome. When you're in Maine, be sure to mention to him, he deserves me. I deserve a phone call. He needs to call me.
Oh, well,
I'm trying to work out some stuff.
I will absolutely name drop you guys at NESM when I'm there, because last time I was there, I've been there since 17 or 18. I took Matt Parkinson's sword class.
Yeah.
And they have an H-frame press, but that thing racks all the time.
Yeah.
So I will absolutely. We were talking on the way here. I'm like, I'm gonna name drop you guys at John C. Campbell too. So.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that.
I got you guys.
Yeah.
You guys take care of me, and I take care of you.
Wonderful. All right, we're gonna end this very long podcast.
Yes.
And thank you so much for coming out. Really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. I'm just glad to be here, and you guys are super helpful, incredible people. So thank you.
Oh my, I'm blushing. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Colecast. We'll see you next time.
So how long was that?
That was at least hour. 2 hours? Oh no.
That explains why I got to piss so bad.
That was so cool.
Was it?
Oh, that was a good time.